There is a common assumption that human psychological development is purely biological, a physical maturation process that reaches its endpoint in early adulthood. Early psychoanalytic frameworks reinforced this timeline. Sigmund Freud established that development occurs through stage-related conflicts, but abruptly truncated that developmental timeline after adolescence. Developmental psychologist Erik Erikson radically expanded this model. He theorized that psychological growth does not stop in youth, but is an active, ongoing process that encompasses the entire human lifespan. Erikson's theory operates on a core mechanical axiom. At every stage of life, the human ego is forced to hold two opposing perspectives, or conflicts, in tension. Successfully resolving this binary tension synthesizes a specific identity strength. Erikson defined these structural outputs as virtues. This is the 8-stage matrix of psychosocial development. It maps conflicts navigated from infancy through adulthood. We will build this matrix from the ground up, observing how each synthesized virtue becomes a load-bearing pillar for the next stage. Human identity is not a passive inheritance. It is a complex architecture built by continuously managing and resolving environmental friction. Looking at Tier 1 of the matrix, we begin with trust versus mistrust, occurring from birth to 18 months. The primary input variable here is total dependency. An infant relies entirely on primary caretakers for baseline survival: food, water, shelter, and emotional needs. When caretakers reliably meet those needs, the infant learns they can count on their environment. This tension resolves into the first foundational virtue, hope. The system then shifts to Tier 2, autonomy versus shame and doubt, covering ages 2 to 4. Here, the developing child begins testing self-sufficiency in baseline tasks, like learning to dress themselves or use the bathroom independently. Caretaker intervention calibrates this stage. Parents who penalize their children for attempting these tasks breed deep-seated doubt. Conversely, allowing children to solve problems on their own when they are ready generates confidence. The successful resolution of this stage creates the capacity for self-expression, locking in the second structural virtue, will. Tier 3 introduces initiative versus guilt, occurring between ages 5 and 8. This requires a critical evolution from doing things spontaneously to actively setting and targeting goals. Consider a child who sets the goal of riding a bike down a steep neighborhood hill. Goal setting at this age introduces inherent physical risks and high probabilities of failure. When the child falls and fails to achieve the objective, the psychological fallout is guilt. Erikson noted that this guilt frequently manifests as aggressive behavioral output directed at parents or peers out of frustration. But processing that guilt and finding a reason to continue performing the behavior creates the third virtue, purpose. This early childhood sequence establishes the operational baseline of the human psyche, trusting the environment, asserting individual will, and executing purposeful goals. As the individual enters stage 4, between ages 9 and 12, the matrix expands. The ego must now process external data from peers and society. This creates the conflict of industry versus inferiority. Children begin directly comparing their aesthetic, athletic, and academic achievements against the rest of their class. The feedback loops here bifurcate. Negative external feedback induces an inferiority complex, which paralyzes future goal setting. Positive feedback provides the exact confidence required to pursue long-term success. Processing this societal feedback results in the realization of individual capability, synthesizing into the virtue of competence. This triggers Stage 5, identity versus role confusion, typically spanning ages 13 to 19. This prolonged stage is marked by intense boundary negotiation with parents as adolescents carve out private lives. Searching for a place within adult society requires deep experimentation. Adolescents test out varying occupations, genders, political alignments, and religious views to find what fits. Surviving this chaotic experimentation secures a true identity within the broader social framework, producing the virtue of fidelity. Achieving fidelity marks the transition from a dependent organism into a fully realized individual operating on society's grid. Shifting into early adulthood, ages 20 to 39, Stage 6 demands a shift from self-discovery to vulnerability. This is the conflict of intimacy versus isolation. The operational goal of this stage is securing an intimate, romantic partner to avoid a life of isolation. Successfully merging lives without fracturing the underlying identity structures built in early life generates the virtue of love. Stage 7, generativity versus stagnation, occupies ages 40 to 59. Erickson defined generativity strictly as systemic output, the act of giving back to the future generation. This output takes highly specific forms: raising children, caring for aging parents, contributing to a career field, and supporting the surrounding community. The opposing force is stagnation, the psychological decay that sets in when an individual lacks the important relationships or the means to be productive. Resolving this tension produces care, the synthesized virtue of middle adulthood. Finally, the terminal phase. Stage 8 is ego integrity versus despair, occurring from age 60 onward. The mechanism here is purely retrospective analysis. Older adults look back at the architecture they've built. Satisfaction with the life lived provides a reservoir of experience to support others. Regret yields deep sadness and depression. Late-stage psychological success relies entirely on successfully integrating and distributing the structural virtues built over the entire lifespan. This chart represents the fully constructed architecture of the human ego. It is an 8-step algorithm of functional outputs: hope, will, purpose, competence, fidelity, love, care, and wisdom. Erickson's model proves that human identity is never finalized in youth. It requires active, continuous negotiation until the very end of life. It also highlights the absolute necessity of conflict. Without the initial uncomfortable tension of mistrust, shame, or guilt, the subsequent virtues physically cannot be forged. The synthesis of all previous tiers results in the ultimate identity strength of the terminal stage: wisdom. Psychological resilience is the exact byproduct of surviving sequential, age-specific frictions. The ego is an architecture built by design, step by step, across a lifespan.